Prior to, I'd say around 2021, I have never been a fan of Plants vs. Zombies. I, of course, knew it existed and of its downfall with the, at the time, release of Plants vs. Zombies 3, the 2020 version. That sucked. But besides that, I didn't really have any interest in the series. Of course, it had, the unique theming and whatnot. But in terms of, me wanting to play it, I was just kind of like, eh. That all changed one day when I was at a family reunion. And at some point, I got bored. And I booted up my family's, or not family, but my mother's phone. And I decided to download Plants vs. Zombies 1 because it was free. And I don't know what happened after that, but I just started becoming enticed by the game, from its plants and, the simple mechanics of collecting sun and then using other plants to get more sun. They can then use to get other plants, the variety and levels and whatnot. It fascinated me. And at some point, I was like, I'm going to get this game on Steam. And then I did. And then afterwards, I fell in love with the series. But all this chit chat is to bring up the amazing community that this game has. I'm not a part of it myself. I may be making this video, but I'm not really that deep into the lore. So when I make a video on a mod like this, it's hit a special place in my heart. And I think more people should check it out. Not saying that's the only PvZ mod out there, putting others on screen too, but this one is probably the most official in terms of like, oh, this could actually be something that could happen, whereas games like Alterverse or PvZ Fusion, those games are really cool, but they don't really feel like something PopCap would do, at least to the extreme that the fan game does. They did try something similar in the 2020 version of PvZ3, but, what do I know? But anyways, enough dilly-dallying and looking back at good times, even if they were in the 2020s. I think it's time that we get into the actual meat and potatoes. Because truth be told, there is a zombie on your lawn again. You gotta sometimes make those corny jokes, because they remove that filtering part of your brain that makes it harder to speak and whatnot. It's the reason why you think of something to say, but you just can't say it. You're filtering stuff. Sometimes you just gotta let it out. Okay, enough venting and whatnot. Let's get to the DLC. So what exactly does the DLC mod add? Well, to quickly go over everything, 2 new worlds, one during the roof at night and one in a forest. New mini games, so many in fact that the page, of course, allows you to scroll down, but also surprisingly taking over the number of mini games in the original. I don't know the exact number, I'll put it on screen when I do figure it out, but there are a lot more mini games compared to the original. Puzzle got brand new Base Breaker and iZombie levels, though unlike the mini games, there aren't more new levels as opposed to old levels, as just like the base game, there's 10 new levels each. So while that does seem like a downside, it really isn't, all things considered, especially since the new mini games over time did get a few extra. So it makes sense why there are more new minigames compared to old, as opposed to the puzzle new levels. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Survival got endless modes for not only the 2 new worlds, but also the previous 5 worlds, which is pretty cool. As in the base game, there was only the 1 endless level, and that was just the pool during the day. There's some new challenges that shake up the gameplay, make it harder, new plants in the shop. There's a lot of content here, and I think it's best if we get into everything rather than stall here any longer. So let's get into the new worlds. In case you're worried about having to do all of the original campaign again, Fortunately for you, the mod actually allows you to skip all the way to 5-9. You hit new game, it's one of the first things you see after the little Plants vs. Zombies screen. You click it, and it's 5-9. Nothing really of note here, it's the same as the base game. 5-10 though was changed since Zomboss has now moved to 6-10. Because of this, it is now a conveyor belt level, and aside from that, nothing really has changed. The same as any other conveyor belt level. You get plants that you got in the world, the zombies that appeared in the world also appear, and that's pretty much it. Finally getting into World 6 though, we get introduced to whatever this is. I mean, I know what it is, but it still looks weird. And then we get a conversation from Dave, talking about Moon being cheese. His in character, I'd say. And we also got a mechanic that is the Blood Moon. Every so often, a message will appear at the bottom of the screen, with the sky getting more red. And actually playing a really disturbing ambience as this happens. Not gonna lie, this actually startled me the first time. Once this happens, the zombies will start rushing at you. And this is basically the fog level equivalent of during the day, you have this new gimmick, and then during the night version, there's also another thing thrown in. First it was the fog, now it's a literal blood moon. Getting into the actual night level, it's basically the same as any other night level. You got your sun shrooms to get sun. The new plant is basically just a catapult version of a puff shroom, but it works surprisingly well, I must say. Not only does it fire farther, you can actually stall for a good chunk of the beginning game by having puff shrooms in all 5 lanes. It can quickly kill out a basic zombie before it even touches it. So if you want a little pro tip, there you go. Of course, you don't just unlock that one new mushroom, of course. You do unlock other night plant variants for the roof, such as the puff shroom equivalent, and even get some from Plants vs. Zombies 2. Which, speaking of Plants vs. Zombies 2, and to an extent the rest of the franchise, it's worth pointing out that this mod does use a lot of ideas from other Plants vs. Zombies games. Sometimes really obscure, like the Plants vs. Zombies 3 version, all the way back in 2020. Now, I'm not going to list all of them, because, spoiler alert, I don't want to spoil that much of the game, since if I did, you'd have no incentive to play it, because you already seen everything. So, I'm not going to say that much about World 6. Well, aside from the zombies, which are, weirdly enough, made me realize that the previous night levels, World 2 and World 4, didn't really have a Halloween dark theme to the zombies or whatever. Like, football zombie, newspaper zombie, balloon zombie. None of these really were Halloween related at all. So I find it interesting how all the zombies in this world fall into the category of, oh, spooky ghosts. Which is not a bad thing, but wanted to point it out. But aside from that, this world's difficulty is actually on par with the original worlds. Something I notice a lot about fan mods is that they usually cater to more skilled players, but here the difficulty is surprisingly on par with the base game. As someone who hasn't played the game since my last time in 2022, I was able to get my bearings and whatnot, which is really good, I must say. And of course, like I said earlier, once you beat all the worlds, you get to Zomboss. Aside from the difficulty being slightly harder and you getting the plants that you got in World 6, now in the conveyor as well as World 5, nothing really new has changed. Oh yeah, there's also a new level 5 gimmick, similar to the other levels, where level 5 is something completely random and or changes up the gameplay formula. But as you can see by the screen, I'm not going to show it, because again, I want you to play this mod. You think I'm just going to let you sit around and do nothing? Get your butt off that bed. sir. Upon getting into World 7, you're introduced to a new character, Sergeant Samson, or Sam as he puts it for short. While it's not directly stated by him that he's like a brother of Dave or whatnot, it is implied by how he talks and his involvement in the story that he is part of Crazy Dave's family tree, which, dang, the crazy man who goes nuts over tacos is a part of the same family tree as a war veteran. Kind of funny, you gotta admit. But getting into the world, the new gimmick this time around is that since you have trees everywhere, the sun produced is only half, with said sun you collect being half the size to visually show this. There's also the bushes too, which actually do make an appearance in the official console versions of Plants vs. Zombies, but those are mainly for the game being in widescreen, and since the original was made for 4x3, going to 16:9, they had to add stuff to the sides, so it wouldn't just be a mess. Hence the bushes. But these ones act a little differently, as not only can they appear if there's no plants on a certain tile, but also zombies can hide in them from most plants. Well, that is all except for the new plant you get, Bee Shooter. It's basically just a pea shooter, except it fires bees, and it can get them through the bushes. So this is going to be mainly your main way of attacking. Though much like the other worlds in this game, using this simple plant at the start isn't going to really save you, and especially after the final flag in the first level, my goodness, you are going to need more plants. Which brings us to a talking point that I actually wanted to get to, but haven't yet. The plants in this game are surprisingly balanced while also being unique. I think something that can easily be done in a Plants vs. Zombies game, especially one with a big plant roster, is that at some point you just start creating plants that can objectively be classified as better than others. Even if there are downsides that the original one doesn't have, it can still overshadow a good chunk of plants, and this is especially prevalent in the vanilla version of Plants vs. Zombies 2. However, in this mod, I didn't really have that much of a, oh, I'm never going to use this plant again, or I'm just not going to use it as a whole. Of course, there are ones that are weaker than others, and I'm not saying that this roster is entirely perfect, but they did a good job at making a good chunk of them feel useful, or at very least you're going to need them for the beginning game. Granted, there aren't that many plants added to this game, but still, I wanted to give a compliment to that. Like, I doubt I would be able to add like 20 new plants to Plants vs. Zombies, while making sure they didn't overshadow any of these plants in the base game. Like, look at them all, my goodness. Apart from that, though, it's basically the same gist as the other levels in not just the mod, but the entire game as a whole. You got your new zombies, which, much like World 6, are based around the theming of the area you're in. The level 5 gimmick, unlike World 6, isn't anything really that major to withhold. So, of course, unlike World 6, you're seeing it here. But what I will say is that there is a new threat in this world specifically. Samson even says it himself at the start. But who that is, I'm going to keep that a secret for now. Just know that the myths are real in this universe. That's all I'll say. Once you do get to level 10 in this world, unfortunately, it's not like some other boss or whatnot. It's just another conveyor belt level, and upon beating it, you get the Zombies on Your Lawn music video before the campaign ends. Honestly, wish that there was a boss in this. Like, there is technically a new boss in this game. However, it's saved as a minigame challenge and as a, well, challenge in the challenge menu. Would have been neat to have it here to first introduce it, and then have it be like some sort of, oh, revenge type thing. But unfortunately, nah. Though I do wish it was added to this world, since hearing back on what I just said right now, I think it could work really well. But that's pretty much it for World 6 and 7. Overall, I'd say, despite only being 20 levels compared to the base game's 50, I'd say what is here is a case of short but sweet. The plants are really unique, and I especially like their designs not being overcomplicated and blending well into Plants vs. Zombie 1's art direction, which also goes for the visuals and the zombies too. Everything about this mod just blends into the first game so well, which I know gets thrown a lot around basically any community. I'll see something, people will be like, oh, this looks official, and then I'll be like, it definitely is faithful and trying to be official, but I can still tell that it's not. However, this mod really makes sure that it's a part of Plants vs. Zombies 1, and I'd say it succeeds. So, kudos to the developers. What is here is really well made and overall great. It caters to, of course, the nostalgic players, but also the casuals who don't know that much about Plants vs. Zombies. I mean, I certainly didn't after like 2.5 years. So overall, regarding World 6 and 7 in the campaign, excluding everything else, this is a good mod. But speaking of those other things and whatnot, I think it's time we finally get into it with the mini-games, as, well, that's the first thing that anyone would do after beating the main campaign. And oh boy, did the developers of this mod really take advantage of the fact that, much like the base game, you can just go wild with your ideas for the mini games, which we'll get into now. Similar to the campaign with how you can skip to the new stuff, the mini games and by extension the puzzle and survival levels as well, allow you to just skip to the new stuff, which I already said this about the adventure stuff, but I really appreciate. But getting into the new mini games though, there is surprisingly a lot to cover, as mentioned a few seconds ago. Going from least interesting to most interesting, we have the brought over minigames, which basically consist of all the unused minigames found on the Limbo page, like Unsodded or Sunny Day, one DS minigame, that being Bomb Altogether, and an unused 6-1 map design that was hidden away in one of the beta builds. Now regarding these minigames, there's nothing really to say of note that most of you probably already know about them. Granted, I will say it is cool to see all of them back, but nothing really has changed substantially in terms of new stuff with them. They're kind of just what you expect, you know, just finalized versions of those concepts. Except for the snow level, since surprisingly that has had the biggest glow up compared to the other minigames by a wide margin. Not only does it have a unique environment compared to every other stage in the game, but it also utilizes the new plants you can get in the shop, which I'll bring up later. I even like how the frozen zombies on the lawn are in the same position as in the original beta build footage of the game. That was a nice detail. Granted, it doesn't do that much, but it still is nice to see. Shows that the people made this cared. But that's all the mini-games brought over from previous games and whatnot. Now we got the actual new mini-games, the ones that were conceived for this mod. For some of them, we have stuff as basic as Plink Panic. Basically, you have a bunch of logs everywhere that a lumberjack zombie can actually place. It's not really hard at all to remove, so this one's kind of whatever. But then other ones, like seeing stars, the entire lawn is covered in pool, and you have to utilize lily pads and whatnot. Football zombies can even get into the water, which never happens in the base game. It's a pretty cool idea to see, especially since the visual of the pool taking up the entire backyard in itself is just really neat. Oh, and there's also the harder versions of the level 5 minigames for World 6 and 7. Not much to say on those. They're kind of just what the base game did, where it just put harder versions of the level 5s of each respective world and not much else. Oh, and speaking of that technique, Zombotomy 3 and Walnut Boiling 3 exist now. And to no surprise, they both add new stuff. Zombotomy 3 utilizes the World 7 theme, and Walnut Boiling 3 actually utilizes a new walnut that's not actually seen anywhere else in the game. It basically just freezes over things on impact. Nothing crazy, but I do like its facial expression. But at the end of our list of minigames, we have the straight up bizarre minigames. Similar to how the original minigames had those weird one-offs, this game also has that with some of the ones such as Corrupted Malware, Flipped, and the aforementioned new boss and whatnot. Now, I won't spoil too much about these since they are pretty rare, as you can probably tell from me saving them for last and mentioning a bunch of other minigames that aren't related in this category. However, I will say one that I did really like, and I'll show you just for reference on how weird things can get. Plants vs. Plants is probably my favorite of these weird minigames. For one, it's a really creative theme, Plants vs. Plants, but also it's surprisingly challenging. The whole concept of this minigame basically just revolves around taking out dummy walnuts, and then when you take out 3, you win, and your opponent utilizes the exact same method that you use of getting said victory. So it basically just becomes a dogfight with the plants utilizing their attacks against each other. Now, the concept in of itself is pretty cool, but surprisingly it is challenging but also fair in terms of difficulty. It's not like, oh, this new concept is pretty neat. No, there actually is substance beyond that. The AI is surprisingly intelligent, and it can feel good to use something like a Cherry Bomb or Chomper to take out the AI's defense. And it goes on for a good length while not feeling too long, which I appreciate. But like I said, I'm not going to say the other ones, but for reference, I will allow an exception to this rule. Now, before we finish up the minigames and whatnot, there's one more thing that I actually forgot to mention. That being the new zombies the side game content introduces. While not exclusive to the minigames, as they also appear in puzzle and survival levels, these zombies do not appear anywhere in the main campaign, and are sort of like hidden away like the Yeti. You got returnees like the Gladiantuar and the Giga Football Zombie, but then you also got some new ones, such as this thing, and Ice Cube Zombie. I think that's what it's called. Yeah, these are basically the guys that appear, and it is nice to see them again, especially the Gladiantuar. That one is extremely OP. Oh my god, I hate you. Go away. Puzzle and survival, when it comes to memorability, is pretty lacking in comparison. Adventure mode had the 2 new worlds, and that was probably the first thing people would see. Minigames, self-explanatory, and the later challenges, which I'll get into later, has some memorability in the fact that some of the challenges in particular are just, what is this? Why? But puzzle and survival don't really have that, at least for me. Puzzle, I think, is the less weak of the two, simply because it has, well, more substance, because it's not survival, you know, the mode where you just replay a world with its specific theming for as long as you can go. You can see why survival doesn't have that much. But going back to puzzle, Facebreaker and iZombie both have 10 new levels. Starting out with Facebreaker, there was some new stuff that I liked. Kaboom was probably my favorite out of the challenges, simply because of the fact that it just contained a bunch of cherry bombs, jalapenos, and also some other new fire plants. Just being able to blow up a bunch of gargantuars and football zombies, it felt satisfying. Crash of the Titan, definitely not a reference to anything, reuses an unused vase type that had a zombie on it. And honestly, I actually like how these vases were handled. In the base game, just having a vase that told you what was in it was kind of defeated the point. So having 2 of them specifically contain the hardest zombie to take down by far really makes you have to strategize and prepare ahead of time and whatnot. It's not as simple as just opening the faces ahead of time and worrying about it later. No, you actually have to think beforehand. Something that the other face breaker levels have, but this one hammers the point home the hardest, I feel. What else is there to say that I liked? The pool got some love. You got dolphin riders and lily pads. That was pretty neat. Newspaper zombie, scaredy shroom. Cool combo, I think. And, iZombie doesn't really get much better either. While it obviously introduces new zombies, both old and new, these are just alright. Conehead zombie is the GOAT when it comes to these, and there's a literal roof iZombie level that has Zomboss as a card, and yet, despite that, you can just use a bunch of Coneheads and win. So, yeah. I apologize if this part sounds negative, but I like to reiterate that this is the weakest part of the mod, and even then I wouldn't consider this bad. Just compared to everything else, it leaves a lot to be desired. Let's get away from all this blah 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 talk. Let's get into the thing I actually mentioned only a few minutes earlier, the challenges. Holy shit. Before starting challenges, I just want to say for the record, I am not a PvZ pro player, to say the least. That's not to say that I wasn't able to get a good chunk of challenges done, but laddering, 10 times health, and double trouble were kind of the only challenges I wasn't able to complete, even if they weren't on the hard mode, which is the thing I'll talk about after this. But talk about the challenges as a whole. Of course, we have some simple ones, such as one where you only can use one lane, or the opposite, but now it's vertical, and there's a shit ton of street for some reason, which is pretty concerning in universe, as it implies that other people's lawns are just as short, so rest in peace to the lawns of others, I guess. But then you have some more less obvious ones, such as Nuzlocke. Pretty self-explanatory. If any of your plants get eaten, then you can't use them for the rest of the level. That, of course, includes instant uses, so if you use like a squash or cherry bomb, those technically die, so say goodbye to those. There's one where you can only use 4 seed slots, which I'd say out of all the challenges, probably the easiest. Not because it was the first one you'd probably do, being at the top left, but also because the combo, at least I used anyway, you can just use Medic and Bong Choi, or whatever his name was, I forgot, to just spam the lawn. With how cheap Medic is too, it's not really hard to place a bunch of them on the lawn. And that kind of set the stage for the challenges, I'd say, being that they aren't impossible, but they are really hard. And then we get to the final 3 that I wasn't able to complete. Laddering, based on the technique people in Endless use to avoid imps from eating their backline. Trying to get pumpkins with the respective ladders on them, because that's also a requirement, you can't just place the pumpkins, is very hard when anything ranging from a catapult zombie to a gargantuar to heck, even actually using like a bomb or whatnot and blowing up the ladders. That's a possibility. And there's just so many zombies too that trying to only let the ladder zombies through is a pain in the ass. Times 10 is self-explanatory. All the zombies have 10 times health, which is weirdly the 3rd level in this mod to do that concept. At least this one does it to the most extreme. And Double Trouble is basically the new boss that I've mentioned time and time again in this video. Only now they're working with Dr. Zomboss, and yeah, this is freaking, bro. I don't think anyone would want to go through the wars that is this challenge, especially on hard mode, which I'll talk about now. In the options menu, there's a little toggle for hard mode, and Basically, the only things it does, from what I've seen, is it removes the lawnmowers, and ×2 zombies spawn compared to normal. But that's pretty much it. But that doesn't change the fact that these are still really hard. Though after looking at other hard mode mods and seeing what those decide to do with the difficulty, I'd say this mod's hard mode is probably the best way a hard mode can be implemented into a Plants vs. Zombies game. Also, whenever you recomplete the adventure mode or any level from the later bonus content, you get a unique trophy type. Doesn't really do much aside from just looking cool, but just look at those colors. You're really gonna turn that down for the normal gold trophy? Come on. It's beautiful. Just like this zombie. His name is Bob. Bob, for those unaware, can be found in the new multiplayer mode that is unlocked after beating level 5 in World 6. He is a friendly fellow, as he can pick through the 7 worlds and a legacy world that basically restricts any content that wasn't in the original multiplayer mode for consoles. You can have one player be on a mouse or one on a keyboard. Every zombie, including the new ones and the plants, have an option to be selected, and I wasn't able to get any footage for multiplayer, unfortunately, so you're looking at someone else's footage. But I will say, it does seem like a lot of fun. While it does replace the create the zombie part of the original game, I think that's the only thing that this game really removes from the original game. At the end of the day, it is a really fun multiplayer mode, and again, while I wasn't able to get anyone to play with me, you can find people to play with on the official Discord server for this game. They have a whole exclusive thing where you can get pinged for people who want to play with you, and I did that. I then later didn't want to, and now I have a total of 315 notifications for this server specifically. Oops. Okay, so this is the point in the video where information becomes really quick and easy to talk about and just get over. So I'll compile the remaining talking points into this semi-lightning round. There are new plants in Crazy Dave's shop. A good chunk of these are just upgrades for plants like Scaredy Shroom, Chomper, Fume Shroom, etc. But you also got some entirely new ones like Fire Pea or Water Pot. And these new plants in particular actually change up the game to varying degrees, especially the Water Pot one I just mentioned, as it allows you to plant aquatic plants on levels that aren't pool related. It's pretty neat. A fast forward button was given to every level and basically just behaves as you would expect it to. It just speeds up the level and makes waiting around not an issue anymore. Some reskins, such as the Exploding Nut and Giga Gargantuar, were given completely new designs, and honestly, I'd say these look a lot better, as the originals were just reskins that really only added red to their designs, and that was about it. Their credits page weirdly has a new bottom to it. Not sure why the China reference is gone, but it's been replaced, and there's not much to say about that. And finally, the thing I've been wanting to get to the most secretly, the unused versions of this mod prior to the major overhaul that is the current version you can play now. A lot of things were obviously changed to varying degrees. The most basic can be some of the mini-games being swapped around in terms of when you play them, to World 7 having different graphics for the plants you unlock, to World 6 being completely different in the order you get the plants, as many of the new plants you get in the shop in the current version actually were originally unlocked in World 6, but were changed due to them not really relating to the roof level whatsoever. And then the biggest change I'd say is an entirely scrapped minigame, Squirrel. This was actually a scrap minigame in beta versions of Plants vs. Zombies, And for a while, this was in the minigames of the DLC mod, though this was later taken out completely as the amount of challenge that you would need to beat it is so piss easy, it's kind of a joke. This isn't like that other one that has a bunch of walnuts on the lawn, as that one actually has some challenge to it. Here you can just shovel every single walnut, and yeah, you win. Cool. The real talk though, why do the squirrels look like that? Is Crazy Dave breeding squirrels secretly? And with that final point noted, that is pretty much everything I have to say for this mod. Overall, I'd say that, as a whole, this is a great addition to Plants vs. Zombies, even if it is unofficial. From the new worlds blending right into the game, fitting like a glove, to the new minigames that are shockingly on par with the quality of the original minigames, if not maybe a little more, but that's just a little bit. To the challenges that, honestly, despite how hard they are really fun to do, and definitely give a new spin on how you approach a normal level. To the new plants and zombies and their interesting descriptions. To even the weakest points like Facebreaker or iZombie still having their moments and honestly not being bad. There wasn't really anything bad I could say about this mod, all things considered. Thank you all so much for making this mod. You truly know this game, unlike PopCap. Oh, one more thing before I finish off. A lot of the footage that you saw in this video was actually taken from other YouTubers. Originally, I didn't even plan to make a DLC mod video until at some point I got motivated out of the blue. Not sure what it was, but I just felt the urge to talk about it so badly. It was that good I came out of, I guess you could say, retirement of YouTube. But as a result, I didn't record any of my footage, and even if I did, the amount of time that would take would be, well, a lot. So I've decided to just use other people's footage on screen. However, because of that, I feel like I should credit everyone on screen right now, since without them, the background footage simply wouldn't exist. You should never ever steal from people like that, because they do all that work, and then someone comes in and takes their work, and then they barely get any credit. So, thank you to all the people on screen now. You truly made my life less of a pain. But with that said, I think that's about it for this video. I appreciate you all watching to the end, or at least one person anyways. Don't know the analytics of this video, though I do not care, because at this point I am not doing YouTube as a job at all. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next time.